Do you suffer from second sock syndrome?
Do you only have one sock in the drawer and it doesn't have a mate?
We have the cure for you today on Off Our Needles.
Second, that was really good. Let's do it again. Hi everybody, welcome to Off Our Needles.
I'm Tracie.
I'm Jodi.
And we're the Grocery Girls.
Today, it's all about multitasking.
Seriously, I feel like some days there are just not enough hours and minutes in the day to get everything done that we want to do.
Yeah, well, especially when it comes to knitting, right?
Well, especially.
I can be baking cookies,
yes,
browning ground beef, unloading dishwasher, and doing spelling with my daughter.
Absolutely. I feel like I'm actually a pretty good multitasker.
I am too. Yeah, I do too.
And it's something that I think is a great skill to transition to your knitting, because I feel good when I finish a project.
Yes.
And I think it really helps us efficiently get through the things we want to get done.
Well, I know I have one sock syndrome. So
it's hardcore. It's a thing.
It's a thing. So today it's really fun because we're talking 2 at a time socks.
I actually think it is the most efficient way to get a pair of socks.
I mean, it's all in our mind that 2 at a time slower, but it's not. It's the best way to do it.
It gets you over that hump of starting and finishing the second one. I agree with you. I don't know that it saves me any time, but I love feeling that those socks are finished at the same time and you get a pair.
So let's talk about multitasking. Okay.
So you want to knit 2 socks at a time. You want to multitask. What do you need to do that? You definitely need a longer circular needle. Somewhere between 32 and 40 inches, I think, is the best. You definitely cannot use your double pointed needles for this. You're going to use magic loop.
Yeah, that's the only way that you can do this,
I
right?
agree, yeah.
You can cast on for 2 at a time for both toe up and for top down.
I love that.
Yeah.
For 2 at a time, I prefer toe up socks, and I'm going to show you how to do that. There's 2 different ways you can manage your yarn when you're knitting socks 2 at a time. You can use one ball of yarn and pull from both ends of it. I prefer to use 2 separate balls of yarn. Today I'm going to show you Judy's Magic Cast On. It is my favorite way to start toe-up socks. Of course, you need your long circular needle, and I've got that in my right hand here, and you're going to hold that together with your needle tips running parallel. You take your tail of yarn and place it over. We're going to call this the top needle and the bottom needle. Let's place that tail of yarn over the top needle and give yourself a little bit of slack to work with. Now I'm going to twist the tail to the back of my work and create a slingshot, very similar to if you've ever done a long tail cast on. When you're doing Judy's Magic Cast On, you're going to create a row of live stitches on each of these needles, and the top yarn will always put your stitches on the bottom needle, and the bottom yarn will always put your stitches on the top needle. This little loop that we put in already is our first stitch. So now we need to add a pair to that on our bottom needle. So I'm just going to pivot my stitches up and down like this to create some stitches. So I'm going to bring my bottom needle up with my top yarn and loop it over the needle like that. Do you see how that created a stitch on my bottom needle? Now we're going to create one on the top needle using our bottom yarn. I'm going to bring that yarn up in between the needles, loop it over, and bring it back to its resting position like that. There you go. Now we've got 6 stitches on the top and 6 stitches on the bottom. That's the cast on for our first sock. But we want to do 2 at a time. So let's get our other ball of yarn going. We're going to slide these stitches down our needle slightly, move the ball of yarn over, and let's bring our second ball of yarn for our second sock. And we are just going to repeat the process here. Now you can see that we've got 2 little sets of Judy's Magic Cast On for our Magic Loop Toe Up 2 at a time socks. To get working our first round of stitches, the first thing we're going to do, turn your needle facing the other direction, because we always knit from the right to the left. And we're going to take a look at what we've done here. If you turn your needle slightly, you're going to see purl bumps on the back. Now that's the inside of our sock. So the right side of our work is out here. Working with the second sock that we just cast on, see this dangly little yarn here? We're going to have to secure that. So let's pull it up and back along our stitches like that. This is going to be our working yarn. And when we do magic loop, we always pull out the back needle to work across the stitches on our front needle. So that's what we're going to do. I'm holding that little tail just right there while I get going with my stitches. And from here, it is just straight knitting. But the first row is always a little bit fussy and kind of loosey-goosey, but we can fix up any looseness with that tail when we weave it in at the end. There we go. Those stitches are done. I'm just gonna drop that working yarn. We don't need it right now. Now we're gonna go to our second sock. Bring those little stitches closer up to the tip of your needle, and you're gonna do exactly the same thing. This last stitch is kind of loosey-goosey. So take the tail to the back, and you've got your working yarn. You've kind of tucked them in together here. Now you're still gonna use the same working needle to work across. So let's use our orange yarn and just work across those. So just like any magic loop knitting, now we want to turn it and work the back side of our needles. So let's just pivot everything around, and we're going to put the needle that was just hanging out doing nothing, we're going to make it do some work now. We're going to put it back in the stitches, pull out our back needle, and let's knit the other half of both of these socks to get us back to the beginning of our round. Sock number 1 finished. Let's grab that second color of yarn. We're going to drop our working yarn for the first sock, pick up the working yarn for the second sock. So as you can see in the middle here, we've got our seamless Judy's Magic Cast On, and we've knit around on each side of our needle of our stitches to create the beginning of our sock. And from here on out, you're just going to use the magic loop method and follow your sock pattern, but make sure you use the right yarn for each sock. It's all about yarn management at this point.
That's a great way to start toe-up socks.
I think so too.
Yeah.
And this is for people that hate the Kitchener stitch. Your Judy's Magic Cast On is basically the reverse of it. You've done your Kitchener already. So I love it.
Okay, so now I'm going to show you another method. I'm going to show you top-down cast on 2 at a time.
Okay.
So I've got 2 different colors here, so I'm going to distinguish between the 2 socks, 2 at a time, because I would knit mine together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cast on half the amount of stitches for our first sock. Okay, so that's 8 stitches, half the amount that we need for our first sock. I'm going to leave that alone right now. I'm going to pick up our second color, and now I'm going to cast on all of my stitches for my second sock, which would be double of my first. So I'm going to cast on 16 stitches. I am using a long tail cast on, but you can use any of your favorite cast ons for socks at this point. Okay, I have 16 stitches, which is all of my required stitches for my sock that I'm going to knit. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to slide these stitches down on top of my cable, just like this. I'm going to take half of my stitches, so 2, 4, 6, 8, like this, and I'm going to gently bend my cable to get it into our magic loop, just like this. So now I have half my stitches on half and half of my stitches on the other. So now we have to go back and cast on the other half of these stitches. So now I'm going to cast on the rest of my stitches on my first sock. So for this part, you want to hold your needles quite close together because you don't want to have any gap here. So I am going to do a long tail cast on, just like I did the first time, but I want to make sure I want to snug it up real tight here so we don't get any gaps. So there you go. That's the start for a 2 at a time sock. You just follow your pattern, making sure to drop your first yarn before you go on to the second. It's a great method.
That was an Oprah aha moment.
I know, it's fiddly to begin with, just because you're working with, 2 different socks, you're working with 2 different balls of yarn.
Yeah.
But once you get going, you guys, this is the way to go.
And I think it's just like anything in knitting, once you get into a rhythm, once you've been in it for a little bit,
Yeah.
it becomes comfortable. And I personally would love to have a pair of socks done when they're done instead of just one sock done.
I know.
So I feel like I've even had a transformational thing here. I think I'm going to start doing more 2 at a time.
This could be the cure for second sock syndrome.
What? If you want more information about how to knit using the magic loop method and wrangling these 2 at a time socks, you need to check out the Knit Smarter with Magic Loop class on Craftsy. And of course, there's a link to that in the description box below. Thank you so much for joining us today, you guys, to demystify the 2 at a time socks.
Don't forget, leave us a comment down below if you're a 2 at a time or do you have the second sock syndrome.
Absolutely. We will see you next time on Off Our Needles.
Bye.